Welcome to Andover Political Review. I'm your host, Owen Ezell. I'm here today with Rohan Sinha, Matt Allen, Jasmine Meade, Julia Jaime Rodriguez. Today, we will be discussing the shocking results of the 2016 federal election, namely how Donald Trump, a brash populist outsider, was able to beat a deeply entrenched establishment figure, Hillary Clinton. Let me start by asking about Clinton. It is clear now how weak a candidate she was. She lost the most unpopular presidential candidate in U.S. history. Can any of you explain why she was so weak?
Well, I think it's the neoliberalism that stopped her from winning against a candidate that was able to really change the dynamics of both political parties. Ever since Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected in 1932, he made the Democratic Party the party of working people, and policies made and proposed by Democratic candidates and presidents since then have been in support of working people. But in this election, I think that those roles were switched. Donald Trump, despite the fact that I personally think he would not help working people as much as his supporters think he would, he won working voters, and Hillary Clinton won with the more establishment, Wall Street-esque, wealthy folk. So I think it shows that when you aren't appealing to the working class voters, that is a way to lose, despite the candidate you're opposing.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. Relative to Donald Trump, she was a weak candidate, but in context of all the other presidential candidates we've seen, she was pretty average. I mean,
well, no, she wasn't. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were the two most unpopular U.S. presidential candidates in history. And Hillary Clinton going in was actually a little bit more popular than Donald Trump. Can anyone explain what the upset was about? Like why? How come all the polls were wrong? You know, how come 538 was wrong?
Well, for the polling, there was a lot of issues with just regarding where they polled. It wasn't that the polls were exactly wrong, it's just they didn't poll in the right areas.
Mm-hmm.
So while I know some states that they didn't get asked the question generally were the states that ended up bringing the election towards Trump's side. So polling was more of an issue of like statistics being wrong than like people asking the wrong question to the wrong people instead of popularity being like different between the candidates.
yeah, looking at the electoral map, you can see that Donald Trump pretty much swept any rural region in the United States, and internet usage in rural regions tends to be a lot lower, and internet polling is more prevalent in more populous areas such as cities where Clinton was dominant.
Yeah.
I think as a candidate overall, Hillary ran a campaign more to win from my point of view, and Donald Trump, while his policies may seem a little bit brash to some people, he clearly had a plan for the future, and I think that was important to a lot of voters.
Yeah, going off that, at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton created a campaign where she tried to get all voters on her side, but the difference is voters like to feel special, that the candidate really wants them. And so making everyone feel special essentially makes no one feel special.
The basket of deplorables comment? I think that was a real killer, and it kind of would.
I don't know. I don't think it was, because those people were never going to vote for her anyways.
Well, I think
right, and I actually think it was a smart strategic move on her part. I think she meant for it to become the statement that got a lot of news coverage within the following week, because up until that point they were talking about emails, more email leaks.
Right.
She wanted to change the point of discussion back to Trump and his supporters are crazy.
I think that a lot of the people that were thinking about voting for Trump who were labeled in the basket of deplorables would have considered voting for Bernie Sanders, and I think that if she hadn't said that, they might have considered voting for her if she had presented a message that was conducive to their economic condition, which is, to say the least, not good.
I think Donald Trump's campaign was like based a lot on inflammatory comments like that, so he didn't get as like bashed for them because he continuously said them.
Right.
Well, Hillary, when she said just one, I think that kind of like her campaign wasn't based on that point.
Right.
So when she brought that in, it's kind of like either she's trying to be like Trump, which wouldn't work for her, or she like really meant that and that that is not a comment you should say as a politician, like whatsoever.
Well, let's get back to the issues that they presented and highlighted during their campaigns. Like, what was the difference, do you think, between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and the message they presented, and how did that contribute to the electoral laws?
In terms of their message, it's hard to summarize Hillary Clinton's whole campaign within a series of 3 words, and while Trump's campaign is based on 3 words.
Right.
So if a voter, let's say some voters only spend 2 seconds deciding who they want to vote on,
Right.
they're more likely to understand Donald Trump's campaign.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that may have been part of the problem, where people had trouble understanding what Hillary Clinton supported, whereas they found it very easy to understand what Donald Trump supported. And on the surface, they looked similar, but when you delved more deeply into what they were proposing, you saw that Hillary Clinton had very detailed proposals. That part of the problem, I do think, didn't involve much change.
Right.
It involved small growth in a lot of areas. But Donald Trump wanted to come in and blow up the whole system. And for a lot of people, that seemed like a good thing.
Yeah.
I think I kind of disagree with that. I think that it wasn't so much easier to understand Donald Trump's campaign as it was to misunderstand it. I think that the media played a large role in that, and it maybe got more publicity.
What was the misunderstanding that you think went on? Like, what are people missing about Donald Trump?
I think that they don't understand his policies because his words are often twisted. I think everyone can agree upon that.
Well,
it's the role of the
His
media.
words are-
What policies?
Well-
I mean, he rarely laid out policy proposals at all, and when he did, none of them were very detailed. It was build a wall, lock her up,
Yeah.
and they didn't involve much more than that.
If you look at his
Julia.
website, he did have a comprehensive plan for each of the
But who
issues
checks
he
the
was talking
website?
about.
Right, but it wasn't nearly as comprehensive as Hillary Clinton's, and that's a good point. Not many people go to the candidates' websites. It's about what you are saying consistently at your rallies or at any events or speaking events that you are that you have. And part of the problem as well, I think, was that Hillary Clinton she had lots of proposals, but she couldn't narrow it down to a few because of that 30 or so second soundbite. She didn't have those main policy
What about the
proposals
sound
that
bites
she
where
could
she
narrow it
basically
down
said
to.
that she needs to have a public and a private persona? What about that soundbite? In other words, in public I need to be for one thing, and in private I need to be for another, so I can rip people off.
Well,
what about that?
What politician isn't like that?
Well, I think
Right.
Bernie
That- I-
Sanders wasn't like that.
Donald Trump is certainly like that too,
Oh,
right?
I'm
He
sure.
changes his mind a
Certainly.
lot
Yeah.
to appeal to different people and to change the discussion that's going on.
Yeah, I think he's an expert in salesmanship and showmanship.
And he certainly took advantage of the media in the fact that he got billions of dollars worth of free advertising by basically saying what they wanted to hear, because what they wanted to hear was ratings increasing.
Yeah, I think the CBS president said that Donald Trump isn't good for America, but he's damn good for CBS. That kind of
Quickly,
attitude.
I'd like
Yeah.
to go back to what you said about Hillary defining her policies. And from my point of view, I think that she didn't define them not so much because she couldn't narrow them down, but maybe because she was afraid to lose voters. I see her campaign as a lot of decisions made just to earn votes and to win the election, but not so much for the future of the country. So I think that's probably why she didn't narrow them down.
She did adopt like a mass marketing strategy. Like you said, she did admit she had a public and private side. And that sort of people pandering is why she lost.
And I think that and if someone else wants to say anything about this, the bringing the celebrities on stage was the complete wrong thing to do. I mean, people in this country are hurting, and they're downwardly mobile in terms of economics. And the last thing they want to hear is a celebrity on stage with a presidential candidate preaching to them about how bad another presidential candidate is who might actually be offering them something.
Yeah, that was a ploy to get at the young voters, but it definitely damaged her bridges with some of the older voters.
I feel
All
like
right, so let's talk about why do you think Donald Trump won?
Why?
And why did Brexit happen in
Well,
Europe?
Okay. I think in general, people aren't ready for the whole multicultural world we're living in. Like the Brexit was basically that. People didn't want more people coming into their country. They wanted it just for them. And Donald Trump is kind of based on the same issue that America is for Americans. Like immigrants, while they're welcome, they're not. They either have to become American or not stay here. So I think people in general are not ready to like coexist. They want people to stay in their respective countries, and that was why I think one of the reasons he won.
Was there an economics? Was economics at work in those two events? Do you think?
Certainly with both, because I think the winning side in each scenario respectfully dumbed down their message, such that people would vote based on their feelings, how they were hurting per se, not what was actually going to be best for the country and not what the experts were saying.
Well, I think that's always been the case to a certain degree, that people vote with their gut. And I think that in a way, and does anyone want to elaborate, how have institutions failed these people, and why did they fall into the arms of Donald Trump and the Brexiteers?
Well, I would say that sort of this idea of democracy has been spread from originally the idea was democracy of a nation, where it's turned into a global democracy where all people are part of this one global nation. And as a result, it's created this situation where leaders think that everyone in the world is equal, and they don't really prioritize the needs of their domestic nations, and are fine with people outsourcing jobs to China and India, doing all that sort of thing that could hurt domestic people.
So the Democratic Party, not just Hillary Clinton, lost big in this election. They lost the presidency, both houses of Congress. They're getting wiped on the state elections. Why do you think they're so weak, the Democratic Party?
I wouldn't say they're so weak as that's part of the democracy, that's part of the system. Both sides are supposed to have an opportunity to
Right, but
fill a
we've
role.
been hearing, the demographics are shifting their way. America's getting less white. It's getting, it's getting less white, and so that's going to favor the Democrats. But why did this sort of red wave happen? In fact, the National Review magazine, a week before the election, their cover was the blue wave, anticipating a blue wave to Democrats were going to take the Senate, they're going to take the presidencies, they're going to win some state houses, and that didn't happen. Why?
Well, the thing is, Donald Trump, instead of mass marketing, he picked a specific group of voters that he wanted his support, namely people with white power-leaning sentiments and people who were sort of American-supporting extremists.
But I think, Matt, you have these statistics in front of you. Latino men and women voted for Donald Trump in the same at the same rates as they voted for Mitt Romney. So he didn't drive away any of the Latino vote. In fact, I think Latino women voted a higher percentage of Latino women voted for Donald Trump than the last Republican candidate for
2%
president.
more.
Yeah, my point was more that he was able to get the white vote out more. Like Romney, in his election, 6 million white voters stayed at home. And his sort of, I wouldn't say pandering, his sort of making those voters feel special got them out to vote.
And I think another part of the problem was Hillary Clinton didn't do as well as Barack Obama. Donald Trump got about the same amount of votes as Mitt Romney did in 2012 and John McCain did in 2008. But Hillary Clinton did significantly worse among especially minorities, 5% less with black men, 2% less with black women, 2% less with Latino men, and 7% less with Latino women. Barack Obama got a lot more of those voters energized, and I think that's another part of the problem. She did not energize voters the way that Barack Obama did, the way that Bernie Sanders did in the primary, and the way that Donald Trump energized his supporters.
It's because she didn't really offer anything unique. I mean, with Barack Obama, there's the African American factor, where there's a huge step forward in civil rights. I agree with it was sort of like that with Hillary, but she didn't pull that card a lot.
She
She
did try
offered-
to make a big point of empowering women, though, which
Yeah.
is that makes me curious about that statistic.
Yeah,
What
but
statistic?
Losing the Latino vote for the women. or-
Right. Well, my point was, is there something at here? Is there more at play here than social issues and race?
Well, economics.
Was it a white lash, or was it people were fed up with some kind of system that they and that they went out and voted against? And as much as Donald Trump doesn't offer any solutions or anything better than that system, I think that that is an important factor.
Well,
Julia.
he definitely made it sound like he offered a solution to that system. Like
Right.
his constant like drain the swamp idea was pandering to that like idea of getting rid of the establishment.
Mhm.
Even though now he's bringing in the establishment back, but just that idea got people like Latino women, for example, who might be in a lower like economic status, might have liked that. Might have been like, oh, that gives me an opportunity to rise and just get like in a better position in life, even though he is against a lot of like
Right.
Latino people.
Right. Let's talk about why Hillary Clinton's I mean, poor people did vote more for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. That's true, but not as many voted for Hillary Clinton than Barack Obama did.
Right.
So let's talk about that. Like, why did her economic message not get home? Does this signify an end of kind of the Clinton era?
It was a very generic message, like I'm going to raise taxes on the wealthy, and I don't know if she said she's going to lower taxes on the middle class.
Yeah.
I'm really not sure. She flip-flopped a lot. It's stuff we've seen before, while Donald Trump offered something novel, something new.
And so did Barack Obama to a certain extent.
Right.
Yeah.
Hope and change.
And I think that's also a deeper issue within the Democratic Party, trying to recreate that model that Barack Obama built and utilized so well. It'll be interesting to see if in 2020 and in 2024, if that can be rebuilt, or if they're going to have to build a new coalition or model.
What do you think that new model would look like? Like, what's the direction of the Democratic Party from here? What do you think? Like, let's pretend we're all Democrats here. I know some of you aren't, Rohan and Jasmine, but what would you do as the Democrats to win votes at this point?
Personally, we need to make a lot of the changes that Bernie Sanders is asking for. We need Keith Ellison as DNC chair so that we could get a progressive candidate as our nominee without being stopped by the establishment, like it was this year in 2016, where clearly the DNC was working in Hillary's favor. And generally, we just need more progressivism rather than neoliberalism, because the
Can you
Democratic
explain
Party.
what those terms mean?
So, progressivism is really working for the middle class, I think. Rather, the main difference is trying to help people with economic messages that support poor people, that support working class people, and try to empower them, rather than neoliberalism, which is sort of the same social liberal policies, but the economic policies are more moderate, where that may not be what the nation wants. They might want something more extreme when it comes to economic policy.
To be honest, it's either go hard left or go home. And at this point, the Democratic Party leaders aren't really going to go hard left, which
So you
means
think that there's going to be some kind of collapse in the...
I think that it'll be a gradual collapse where there'll be another hard left third party, and
Yeah.
eventually they're just going to be gone, unless they adapt. But
You guys have anything to add to that?
I was just going to voice the same that Matt said, that Bernie Sanders, like his campaign, would have definitely been in the best direction for the Democratic Party this run, and probably in the next run. Because if you think like Donald Trump is fire, Bernie Sanders could have been like the water to fight that. Hillary
Right.
was just not strong enough. So they need a really strong opinion to
And Jasmine?
yeah.
I would say, even from my most unbiased point of view, I would encourage Democrats to maybe embrace the election of Donald Trump, see how his presidency plays out, maybe stop pushing against it, and maybe see where it goes, see why he's become so popular.
Well, I think some Democrats have indicated that. I think Bernie Sanders went on record saying, we're willing to work with the new president, on issues of jobs, infrastructure, trade deals. what we're not interested in is working with the new president on his immigration proposals and proposals about, basically social issues. That being said, I think that Donald Trump, he's kind of veered from his message a little bit since he's been elected. His cabinet is not really, I don't know, it's not really draining the swamp when you put, a Goldman Sachs employee as your
I
treasurer.
don't think it's his own.
Right.
I mean, it looks a lot like a cabinet that Mike Pence would have chosen, and I think that's what we, especially I, have expected. It was rumored that he offered Kasich the VP job and said, "You'd be doing economic policy and foreign policy, and I'd be making America great again."
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the same thing with Mike Pence.
Right.
It's really Mike Pence that's going to be running the show here.
So kind of like a George W. Bush Part 2. What do you think, Rohan?
I don't know. Like, I feel like Kasich should have taken that job. I mean, he could have eased a lot of the hits we might possibly take.
Let's talk about sort of the international perspective on this. Donald Trump's election was kind of part of this broader phenomenon of right-wing populism in the Western world. So in Europe, I think in Austria, they might elect on Sunday. They have the option of electing like the first far-right candidate for president, or maybe it was prime minister, since the fall of the Third Reich. So, what are your thoughts on that? How does this sort of relate to a larger phenomenon?
Well, like I said before, this sort of Western democracy has created the system where they want to create a global democracy where all people are equal. But like a factory worker in Detroit doesn't really care about a factory worker in China. Though he probably dislikes the factory worker in China because
he's stealing his job.
stealing his job.
Right.
So I feel like this sentiment, because of globalization, is sort of rising, where there's sort of an economic hatred towards how capital is fleeing Western civilization, either to Asian countries or to the 1%.
Does anyone have anything to add about that? All right, I think that's it. I think we've covered it.